Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Stranger Things Season 4 premiere. A great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I read stuff here and there, and just looking at the trailer alone, I got the feeling like, oh, this seems like this is going to be a dark season. This episode alone proves like, oh, how dark this is. Like not juxtaposition, but like the fact is, you start off dark with the opening to the show this season, and then you end it with something dark. I mean, I think this is going to be probably this. I think this season is definitely going to lean into the horror element even more so than any of the other previous seasons. First and foremost, that opening, I don't think we'd ever gotten any insight into whatever happened to the other test subjects, did we? Obviously, we know, I'm always blinking on her sister. Her sister's 7, right? I can't remember. It's been a while since I've seen season 2, but I don't remember what her sister was. Well, I want to say her sister was like number 7. But obviously, we're following Dr. Brenner, and it's interesting because it seems like 11 potentially snapped and killed everyone, but as you notice, it seemed, because I was looking, is that supposed to be like a younger 11? And it seems like it is. Like, her eyes are bleeding, her nose was bleeding, and she basically killed everyone in there, which immediately my brain was like, because at first I was like, that seemed like that was something monstrous. So I was wondering, like, has she already opened the pathway to the Upside Down and something came out, like a Demogorgon or something? But I'm like, I feel like that wouldn't be left if a Demogorgon had attacked. So now, with the nature of what we got throughout this episode, part of me wonders, like, are we dealing with... It seems like this season might be dealing with some demonic possession. Because there are Freddy from, like, Nightmare on Elm Street elements to this. Which, obviously, this kind of... The Nightmare on Elm Street movies came out in the 80s, didn't they? I think so. I could be mistaken. But we're definitely getting, like, kind of Freddy vibes with certain aspects of, like, the kind of... It also seems like I said, there almost seems to be, like, almost exorcist elements to it as well. But jumping into it, picking up where everyone is, Mike, Lucas, and Dustin are all part of a new D&D club, the Hellfire Club. Which, interestingly enough, I was like... Do correct me if I'm mistaken, but isn't the Hellfire Club a Marvel comic thing too, in that regard of, like, isn't it tied to the Brotherhood of Evil? I'm only saying that because I believe, it's been a while, but I believe the group in season 2 of The Gifted, that X-Men mutant-related show, wasn't that bad guys in that, the Hellfire Club, and they have associations with, I don't think it's like the next generation of the Brotherhood, but I think they're a different group that has ties to the Brotherhood. Well, they didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, because that's where I assumed the Hellfire Club was coming from. I mean, maybe it has correlation there. Like I said, I could be completely wrong. I might be misremembering, but it's interesting that they've joined this whole thing, and we meet their very eccentric DM and leader, Eddie, and Eddie seems like he's kind of, and that's what, he collects the outcast. He's kind of like very much like, he's almost like the goth kids meets the nerds, because it's like, oh, like everyone else has got their little sects, and he's kind of like, right, he's talking about, he wants to hand the Hellfire Club off to newbies like Mike and Dustin, because he's like, oh, remember when you guys first showed up over there? Dustin, you were wearing a Weird Al t-shirt. He's like, that was brave of you. And Mike, you were wearing clothes that your mommy got you from the Gap. But look at you now. And it's like, we want you to pluck up some young lost sheeps just like we did to you. Because a lot of them are graduating. One of them's got like a year and a half left. And Eddie's like coasting by, and he's like, cool. If I can just manage, I will be graduating. So, which I know I'm totally down that lane with Eddie. I'm kind of a coaster. I coasted my way through high school, especially on the back half. That's a whole tangent within itself. But it was interesting getting introduced to him like that. And I love that they go around trying to collect people to replace Lucas, because Lucas is on the basketball team, which at first you're almost like, man, that seems so out of place. But it's because Lucas is trying to become popular. He's like, right, all we ever did was get bullied. Let's not forget what happened in the first season was them getting bullied. And so It's like, right, he's like, he wants to get on he's on the basketball team. Granted, he mainly sits on the bench, but it's like, hey, if I could get in good with these guys, I can become popular, and you guys can become popular too. Which Mike's like, who says we want to be popular? We don't care about that. But he's like, dude, aren't you tired of girls laughing at us and us being the laughing stocks and being bullied? He's like, I'm tired of that. Which is like, you get that. Why he would want to, like, increase their cool. So the championship game's around the corner, and he wants to hope that if he can get in cool with everyone else, he can bring his best buds along with him. So there's that. But Mike and Dustin try to postpone the Hellfire Club, but Eddie was like, no, find a replacement. And the moment it's like, oh, they're looking all around the high school and people have want nothing to do with it because word has gotten out about, like, oh, D&D is satanic, it's this and that, at least to murder. I'm like, oh, was D&D... I mean, I think that's a possibility. I mean, just like metal, it's like, oh, what was metal revered at one point in time? Oh, that's Satan's music. So it's like, yeah. Like, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. I feel like I vaguely might have heard that before, that, like, D&D was kind of treated like that in the past. But, nevertheless, I thought that was interesting that they end up finding a replacement. And, is like, the moment they're like, oh, wait, we're looking for high school, and Dustin, like, had a light bulb moment, I was like, oh, it's going to end up being Erica, isn't it? Lo and behold, replacing one Sinclair with the other. And, legitimately, that the bouncing between the basketball game and the D&D game, I was like, oh, dude, I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, oh my god, it's coming down to the wire. They're the only two, because it's like, oh, do you want to keep playing or do you want to face death? And everyone chose death, but everyone on the team was gone except for Dustin and Erica, and it took, like, the big bad had like 15 points left, which obviously. There's always been parallels between the D&D angle to it and the overarching story. There's always been a parallel. I mean, that's why the Demogorgons are called the Demogorgons and the Mind Flayer and all that. It's because of their D&D game. So I think the fact is that seems like, oh, they're setting up some parallels. Like, the fact is when Eddie put down that piece, I was like, that's going to be the main antagonist of the season, isn't it? So I just thought that was kind of like a nice jump between those two, as like it comes down to both Sinclair siblings like putting in that final shot, which actually was pretty sick. Lucas getting the final shot, being celebrated. Obviously, it sucks for him because his best friends weren't there, and then to find out they did the campaign without him, he's like, I asked you, I begged you guys to come along. Not only did I not get to be included in this because the D&D thing is their thing, it's always been their thing. And I think they probably do that even more so to because Will's not around anymore, so they probably do it even more so because of that. They kind of, keep, it's what connected them in the past, and they want to stay connected. And obviously, these past seasons, we've really, especially season 3, really leaned into the fact is that they were kind of already getting detached. Like, Dustin came back after being gone for a month and felt like, oh, like, he kind of was disconnected from everybody. Then you had Will feeling the same way as well last season, and now even more so now. Now it seems like Mike and Dustin are drifting away from Lucas, or maybe vice versa. They might each see it the other way around. So Lucas is getting in with his new clique, which we learned some interesting things about Lucas, that him and Max ended up breaking up. But Max, she's definitely in her kind of almost, not necessarily rebellious phase, but she's kind of in her loner phase, I guess is more so what it is. Her listening to music all the time. It's like understandable. After the brutality of, like, what happened to Billy, we find out her stepdad left, which even she's like, it's not that big of a loss. At least there's less assholery around. But it's almost like, right, did he leave because, like, oh, what happened to Billy? It's like, you were not the greatest father as we've seen. So, but, it's like, regardless of it all, Billy was the last family he had, so maybe that was the final straw. And it seems like his Max's mom is drinking a lot. She's like, and she tried to justify, like, look, my mom's working 2 jobs, so it's not like she's drinking a lot because the counselor's trying to talk to her, but Max is not having that. Then she brings up Max having headaches and the nightmares, and she's asking Max to be open. Max is like, I am open. It's like, well, there's only some extent she can be open because she can't tell the truth about everything. And especially doesn't help that the basketball team is using, like, I get it. They're like, right, let's rally around the team because of the terrible stuff that's happened in the past year here in Halkin. All those that died, including, like, they mentioned Heather, they mentioned Billy. So it is kind of like a little bit of a ugh. And that was kind of a sore subject. You could tell like Lucas was kind of like ugh, that they brought it up. And you could tell Mike and Dustin were just kind of, because it's like, right, they're going by the public story, like the people that died in the fire, like, oh, our great Chief Hopper who sacrificed himself. So, but they know the truth, and that weighs heavy on them too. So like being the only ones who know the truth about what happened has got to be a heavy burden to bear. But speaking of Max's situation, when she was talking to Lucas and Lucas was like, oh, you're a ghost, and then we see everything that's happened to Chrissy, I was like, that's what Max is going through. She's the reason why she was like, a ghost? Like, why she said it like that? Because she's literally dealing with that. She's kind of being haunted right now. I think this bad guy, once again, is like a Freddy, where he uses whatever pain and torture you've been through and uses it to torture you. So in Chrissy's case, I think it was like he was using like a demonic version of her mom. But I think probably most likely with Max, it's using Billy. So, and I think that's what she's dealing with. She should talk to the others about it, but she's not. Because I guess she's thinking it's just trauma, it's all in her head. So she doesn't think it's that big of a deal. When in actuality, it's important that she does talk about it. Because there's something serious going on here. But I think she just thinks it's her internalizing so much stuff. But it seems like she ostracized herself. Like, she hangs around Mike and Dustin, but it's still just kind of like, it's not like what it was. Because I was about to say, because even at the end of season 3, despite everything, it seemed like she was good. Like, despite, that was 3 months later, but that was like a snapshot into her life. So it seems like things have obviously escalated and gotten even worse in that time frame. So, because we already know in the, based on the trailer, kind of spoilers, but the whole clock thing, I thought that was a Max thing alone, and now seeing that Chrissy's dealing with, I'm like, oh, so other people, and the way Max has been acting, so he's probably like, whatever this antagonist is getting multiple people at a time, but like we're only focusing on Chrissy and Max right now. We don't know that Max is going through it, but I feel like we can conclude that based on what Chrissy's going through and just based on the trailer and everything, that Max is going through it as well, but we have no idea who else is being affected like that, so. Because obviously the biggest question is, what is the whole deal with the clock? Obviously we'll get an answer to it, but obviously, once again, it's a rhetorical question to me, just at, letting you know ahead of time, like at the, me watching this, like not knowing where the rest of the season's going to go, because I've only seen episode 1 at a time and recording it. So just, letting my thoughts of like what the clock's deal is. Is it like why specifically a clock? It seems to be kind of this thing, calling card signature, because I wonder if the clock does it signify how much time you have left? So like maybe like the closer, like maybe it's almost like the oh god, I always forget its name. It was someone correct me on it. Was it the Doomsday Clock? Where it's like, oh, the closer you get to midnight, the worse things are. So like maybe this thing kind of has a similar thing of the closer it gets to midnight. When it strikes midnight, that's when the thing comes get you. Like maybe that's what that's supposed to be. Maybe not. But that's once again just me throwing that out there right now. It was interesting with the whole Eddie and Chrissy thing, because it seems like, right, they've known each other. He's like, it seems like he kind of likes her, and it's like, oh, he's like, I always thought you were mean and scary. She's like, oh, I thought you were mean and scary. They have both different preconceived notions of each other. It seems like he's kind of like the nerdy dude that also sells, he's also in a band. He also sells weed and other drugs. So that was interesting. He was trying to hook Chrissy up, because she was probably trying to drown out everything that she was dealing with. I wonder, is like, maybe she's so terrified that it's just upsetting her something, because when Max ran into her, she was throwing up. And she also left the counselor's room, which you're like, I don't think there's any correlation there, but she did seem upset, but it's probably because the counselor was doing the same thing she was doing with Max, prying and asking a whole bunch of questions that she probably didn't feel comfortable answering. Are we supposed to know who Chrissy's parents are? Were they people that died when the Mind Flayer like basically turned everyone into flesh and fused together and made that monster? Or was her parents part of that? Because then it starts throwing in a pattern of, it's this thing going after people who lost so... Because it might be one of those things of like, oh, this is something that feeds on your terror and everything and all the pain you're going through. So it's probably more likely going to pick people who are directly affected and lost on because of everything that went down last season. So, which obviously Max lost Billy, so that's not probably, it definitely is like the wound that could get picked at, you know. So we'll see as things kind of progress through the season whether that ends up being the case or not. But so there's all that. Then we have everything in California which the opening where she's talking like that, I was like, oh, like, and I do like that it's a subtle thing. Like every season, Elle's like vocabulary and just the way she goes about talking gets better and better. She's like, I hope my grammar's too good. I hope I didn't have too many misspelling errors and stuff. But you can tell like her grammar and the way she talks is still a little off, but it's like leaps and bounds, even more so like just the way she talks and just her tone and everything. I was like, oh, that's like it's a nice thing you can immediately recognize as the voiceover talks about it as she's writing the letter to Mike and everything, which is really cute. And it doesn't seem like she actually has any friends at the school. She's trying to pretend like everything's okay, but it seems like the only person she's tight with is Will. Which, interestingly enough, there's this Will situation I thought was interesting. There was that girl who was like running her foot up his leg. I was like, whoa, that's pretty forward. But I guess like they're supposed to be high schoolers and stuff. I'm like, still, that's like, whoa. But Will's kind of pulling away from her, and I'm like, because 11 was like, yeah, he's painting something, but is it someone that he likes? And it's like, but he won't show me. And I'm like, that's why I was rewatching season 3 made me go like, do you think could it be that like, either it's going to be something like Will likes 11 or something, and it's going to be like, oh, I feel complicated about that. Or he's discovering that, he doesn't like girls. He might like boys. So maybe that's where my mind was rewatching season 3. I was like, Is that what they're going to lean into? Like maybe he's dealing with that and he doesn't want to tell anyone, just like Robin. Because the only person Robin's confided into about being gay is Steve. And I love that whole back and forth they have about like, it's like, no, she stopped it at 53 minutes and 5 seconds. You know who stops that that movie at 50, was it Fast Times, at 53 minutes and 5 seconds? Someone likes boobies. She's like, stop saying boobies. It's like, boobies. You like boobies. I like boobies. Victoria likes boobies. It's like, because it's like, right, we know what this is all about. You like Victoria. And she's like, no. And it's just like, yeah, but she's like, right, you say you like a girl, and you get rejected, you might get a blow to your ego. That's fine. I tell a girl I like her, it could turn me into a town pariah. So, we haven't really dived into Robin's family either, like, at all. We only met Robin last season, so I'm wondering if this season we're going to meet her parents or not, and just whether or not that's going to be a complicated situation. I mean, especially, like, once again, it's the 80s, too, so who knows how that's why she's worried about anyone finding out. But it's still interesting to know that Steve's still the only one who knows. I do like at the basketball game, I was like, Tammy starts singing. I was like, oh, Tammy, right. The one she had a crush on before, the one who will only look at Steve, but that made Robin stare at Steve because it's like, right, Steve is an asshole. What does Steve have that I want Tammy to look at me? And then the whole back and forth of like, right, her sounding like a terrible singer, like Steve looking at Robin. Robin's like, okay, you were right. He's like, a Muppet. And she's like, yeah. And she had that whole thing between her and Victoria. It's like, yeah, I had a huge crush. Or what? We took a really hard class last year. It's like, oh, okay. Like, oh, I'm curious that I kind of want that to work out because you want Robin to be able to find somebody. Steve is with Brenda and everything, so he's thinking that she might be the one. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think there's other elements that I was kind of wondering. Was like, based on her trailer, I was like, oh, is that where they're going to take Steve's story? Because I was like, that'd be interesting if that's the direction they go. I'll go ahead and talk about it. It seemed like it's not explicit, but there's like a little moment in the trailer that I was like, are they setting up like a Steve and Nancy thing? And there might be some reconciliation there on some parts. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see. Because obviously, Jonathan and Nancy are balancing the whole long distance relationship thing. Obviously, they like check in for holidays. That was something they were setting up last season. I'm like, okay, when spring break comes, I think Mike and Nancy are going to go there. Yeah, they're going to California, so I don't know if the others are going to go too, or is it just them, but I think that's fascinating. But Jonathan's a bit of a pothead, and his best bud is one too. As Levin puts it, like the smelly plants or whatever. Which poor 11. It's like, man, no matter where you go, kids suck. Kids, they're the absolute worst. The way, like, it's like, oh, this person did something. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, that was on Helen Keller. I could be mistaken, if I'm remembering correctly. And then 11, Jane. At first I was like, oh, why'd they give an ending? I was like, all right, I forgot. Jane's her real name. I forgot about that. I didn't remember that until just now, because I was like, oh, I guess they're just calling her Jane. I was like, right, because Jane is her real name. Because Hop never even called her that. He called her Elle, you know? No one really called her by her real name, like, even upon, but it's like, right, kept going around calling her 11. I mean, you could call her Ellen, just be like, oh, it's short for Eleanor or something like that, but regardless. But her doing her presentation about her dad, and it's like, oh, you're poking fun of it. It's like, my dad saved people in a fire in a mall. And they're like, oh. Also, you douchebag kids who are laughing, her father, Hopper, at least they believe him to be dead. You suck. You kids suck so much. You're terrible. And then also later on, she trips Elle too. And Elle, you know, kind of embarrasses herself in front of the entire school and tries to use her powers, but it does. I was like, oh, please run over there and punch her in the face. No, but she tries to use her powers, but it doesn't work. Good thing, too. Last thing you want to do is go full-blown, which I'm sure there can be a comparison that they're going to make very Carrie-esque with the high school situation. Could be something they lean into. Is that a Stephen King book? I think it is, isn't it? I always forget that. I think that is a Stephen King story. Tangents aside, because there's other like Stephen King stuff that's like being referenced. Well, in the previous season, and even in this season, that I just never. I think I never really thought about it too much. But so I'm getting a feeling like they'll probably make 11 have her like full blown Carrie moment, I guess, which are kind of hoping not. I guess I just thought about the short-lived show, which obviously is based on a comic, so you can get the full story that way, but I think I'm not okay? Is that what... Or is it just, I'm not okay with this? I don't remember the title off the top of my head now. That had a very Carrie element and moment to it, but once again, tangent and all that aside. Angela's the douchebag girl's name. This show has a tendency to, like, reform douchebags. Billy didn't really get reformation, but you became more sympathetic because you knew, like, right, the reason he acted the way he did was him overcompensating for an abusive father. So Steve was trying to always be cool, but they easily redeemed him. So I think Angela's going to be that. I think her and 11, when it's all said and done, are actually becoming really good friends. I think very much like how... Because we don't know what Steve and Jonathan's relationship were like. They've never really... I mean, they were around each other in season 2, but I feel like they weren't even around each other, like, barely in season 3, so we never really had too many interactions between them. So I'm not 100% sure where they currently stand in everything. I guess it's like the awkwardness of, like, right, you're dating my ex-girlfriend, so it's probably, like, weird, but we're all part of the same tight-knit group, so that complicates things. But, yeah... I think, I guess it would be like kind of like Steve and Dustin became like hit it off, or even like Steve and Robin. They kind of didn't always get along. It wasn't the same thing, but you know. But I get the feeling like that might be what that setup might be of like, oh, your bully becoming your friend type of situation. So we'll see in the long run what ends up happening there. But other than that, we had the Joyce situation. She's working from home and she's calling up Murray after she gets the Russian doll, and he convinces her to break it open. And it turns out there's a letter inside, look like it's magazine cutout letter saying, like, Hop is alive. And he's still looking forward to that date or something like that. So, because at first they're like, right, why would the Russians send something to Joyce? Like, how would they know I was responsible for everything that went down in the mall last season? And a lot of those Russian people, like scientists and stuff, dying. Like, how would they know me and my address and stuff? Because the only person's information they got that we know of is, I mean, who knows how many of those people are still alive? Because I don't know if that commanding dude that was interrogating Robin and Steve last season, I don't know if that guy, I don't think you saw him die on screen. He might be back in Russia. So, like, we know he knows Dustin's name and stuff, but he didn't know anything about Joyce, so... But then finally we get let's focus on the ending, which, like I said, was so disturbing in it. And it's so interesting because it's not even like it's almost an upside down thing, but it's not. Because Chrissy kind of went into some other world. It's almost like once again, it's like Freddy can come after you in your dream, so you always want to stay awake. But it seems like this can put you in a dream-like trance. So it's almost like bringing you to because it's like the upside down, but not really. It seems like this thing is able to control that world, and so it drags you into that world. But from Eddie's perspective, it looks like Chrissy's on the outside just standing there and her eyes are fluttering. And it seemed like she was brought into her house. Her dad's face is like stitched up, his eyes and his mouth. So does that mean that thing got to her father already, or what? Cause maybe her mom's not around, but maybe her dad actually still alive. But maybe that's implying that this creature got to her dad too. I don't know. But you were almost hoping that Eddie would be able to wake her up, but he wasn't able to. You're like, oh, dude, that sucks. And it grabs her face. It's like, right, I'm going to bring your trauma, your terror to an end. And then, once again, very like Poltergeist-esque. Once again, also Freddy-esque. Like the way she hits the ceiling and then like her eyes pop and everything and her bones break. You're like, gee. I was like, that is so brutal. I was like, ugh. Like crumpling her like paper. I was like, that's so jacked up. And the sad thing is, the last person to see Eddie and Chrissy together is Max. So Max is going to assume Eddie's did something and Eddie's going to get in trouble for it. Probably. So he's already got a reputation, and now you add this, which he would have never done anything because he actually, I think, always liked Chrissy, and, you know, they rekindled everything after this. But it's like, right, there's always going to be those deaths. You know, it's like, there's always going to be a Barbara or something. You know, it's like, oh, I mean, once again, let's not forget, 30 people died last season. So even more so. Because I don't know if we know all the people that became the monsters. I don't know how that hospital situation got covered up because there were quite a few bodies there. So not unless they got lumped into that as those bodies that died in the fire. Once again, you have government covering stuff up. There's no limits to that. But like I said, a brutal and dark start, but also like, you know, kind of having a little bit of fun in the middle. But yeah, I am so pumped for this season. I'm so excited to continue watching. I'm so excited to see where this next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.